many times, people in after modernity and in 21st century, we wanna. Well, when I say we, I mean the society today. We are so proud of our scientific, technological, medical achievements that many times people today put people from back in the days, they put them down as underdeveloped, they
Hmm.
were ignorant, all these things. But when you see the Code of Hammurabi, and I think for one paper I shortly compared it with Moses' Law, and it showed up to be Moses' Law showed to be superior. And I know this sounds very subjective and biased, and I don't care. But I think I was comparing either the Old Testament laws about either when it comes to treating women or treating the poor or foreigners or slaves. I know because I was writing about when it comes to social justice from the Old Testament perspective, and I was comparing with Hammurabi's law. But I just want to say when you see these old ancient documents, when you see the old ancient structures and megaliths, in no way these people were underdeveloped and primitive, and that bugs me so much because today we tend to put those people down instead of having this humility understanding. We know today and we develop today because we stand on the shoulders of those people. Our knowledge today is only accumulated knowledge throughout all these millennia.
Hmm.
We were not born into all this knowledge that came out of blue in this vacuum. No, we learn from the previous generations that learn from previous generations that learn from all those from the beginning. So I was just thinking, like, would you agree that the ancients, they were in no way, yes, they didn't know maybe that bacteria existed, they didn't have internet and those things, which is perfectly normal, but they were in no way primitive, underdeveloped. I don't want to use the word stupid, but ignorant. They were not. They were actually very advanced for their time, especially when you see that even now today we don't know how they build those um, huge megalithic structures. For example, in Lebanon, you have those huge obelisks. There, each of them is like 1,000 tons. Who cut them? Who brought them there? They still cannot do that nowadays in 2023. So, and I like learning about these things from the past because it just showed me, regardless of if these ancients were taught by the watchers all this secret knowledge, which I believe according to the Enochian tradition they were, but still it just shows me that the people who were born thousands of years before Jesus, they were in no way some caveman, right?
Yeah, totally. Like we have to understand that the development of civilization has been fairly exponential. I think in some ways now we've hit a cap, and so our advancement is in very specific areas. But it took a long time to ramp up. I think a good example of that is the early 20th century, late I guess late 19th, early 20th, we finally get proper flight. We get airplanes, right? And we do that. And like 50 or 60 years later, less than 100 years later, we're in outer space. Like that's a huge amount of development that all happens together, spurned on by the world wars and everything else that happened. But you go from nomadic people to agriculture over probably 1,000 years, maybe more. Depends what timeline you find, right? And then from basic agriculture and serfdom and kings and lords and that are happening for another 2,000 years at least, right? And then we start to get freedom and individuals and cities and more build up in universities and technology that way. In the West, the Enlightenment, even in the East, by the time they get math and stuff in the Middle Ages, and it kind of compounds. But the fact that information can go around the world so fast now, it's just different. But I don't it's there's some people that seem to come across like the ancients couldn't think about any of this stuff. I don't think that's true. I just think that the resources they had were much more limited, right? We, as a human race, we have grown and changed, and that's happened over that, however you look at it, we're not the same that we were 4, 5, 6,000 years ago. That's very true. But to think that we're less capable, I'm not sure that's true. There are some pretty wondrous things that happened and they were capable of, but what they had to work with was very, very different. And so that's why I think there's value in looking at this stuff and treating it sort of honestly and not as lesser, but then from a Christian perspective, also putting it in the right framework, right?